What is going on, Governors? Chisgule here, and today we're going to show you how our kingdom prepared to take rallies to defend against Attila and Takeda. What is going on, my friends? Chisgule here. We've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to show you optimizations our kingdom actually made in battling Attila and Takeda. I know all of you are saying, whoa, Attila Takeda is so broken. Let me just say, there are two hard counters that I have yet to see anyone point out. Hard counters to Attila Takeda. I have promised that I would not share them on my YouTube channel, which is why they were shared with me at all in the first place. Two hard counters exist. Now, we didn't use those hard counters in this KVK because we didn't want our opponents to figure out, wait a minute, this works, let's start using it. So what I'm going to show you is the optimizations we did make in order to not show our hand, to not show the cards of how you hard counter Attila Takeda. So here are changes you can make, and if you were using these commanders, these are things that you can do. And by the way, we're going to have a clinic tomorrow. It's going to be a live stream, how to counter any commander. You're going to want to tune in for that because we're going to step through the sort of things you look at, the levers you have to work in your favor to counter any combination that were to come into the game. And, you know, you look like I could complain about it or I could start to dig in and work with what I got, and I like to dig in and work with what we've got. So let's get into the optimizations, again, we made with extensive past level 1 testing in order to figure out what a good Attila Takeda defense would look like. Now, the first thing, of course, that we're going to look at when we're defending against Attila and Takeda is Garrison Commanders. It's conceivable that a non-Garrison commander would be better in defending against Attila and Takeda, but we started by looking at Garrison Commanders, and there's a handful of pretty obvious choices, and this really does narrow down this very wide field into a handful of commanders that we need to look at. Those commanders include Isong, Richard I, Charles Martel. In addition, it also includes a few commanders that we haven't expertised yet, such as Constantine and also the eternal female emperor, Wu Zetian. So that very much narrowed the starting point for where we might look to optimize against Attila and Takeda, and we very, very quickly realized there is a major optimization to be had right over here in Iron Spear. In the infantry tree, there is a talent that gives you 3% additional damage to cavalry for each point that you put into it. And it boosts your infantry against cavalry. 9% extra damage is actually a lot for 3 talent points. If we look at another tree, like, let's get a look in the leadership tree. We'll find a leadership commander real quick. Normally, in order to get 1% extra damage dealt, you need 1 talent point per percent of extra damage, so 3 talent points for 3%, as opposed to 9%. And you're constrained, like you have to have 3 different types of troops to make that happen. So there's a condition you have to meet to even get the 1% per point. So 3% per point in the infantry tree is very good. The other thing that we realized in making optimizations here is that there are a bunch of talents that are not going to help against Attila and Takeda. Attila and Takeda are very unusual in that they only do normal attack damage. So if the thing that you're optimizing for is normal attack damage entirely, then you need to remove things you might have used otherwise, like loose formation, reducing skill damage taken by 9%. You would remove emergency protection because you don't take skill damage. This would never come into play. You remove things like impregnable, reducing the skill damage you take by 15% because you don't take skill damage when you're battling Attila and Takeda. So there are a lot of optimizations that we started to make. Let me just go and show you a build that I think is really good on a commander like Charles Martel. Here, and this is not the build, here is a build that I think is really good in a anti-Attila Takeda world. And maybe the thing I should show you, actually, let me just show you as a reference point. Here is, and Richard and Charles, they have the exact same talent trees. So, it's like we're kind of looking at the same thing over here. This is a Garrison build I think is really strong, and I personally used in this KVK when there was like a panic moment and it's like Chisgule has to be the Garrison captain. I used Richard and Charles, and I used this build. This build is very strong in reducing skill damage, in giving you an unbelievable number of stats from King's Guard, reducing the damage you take. It does have Iron Spear in case we think cavalry might come at us. However, you almost sort of don't need it unless you think you're going to be countering Attila Takeda, because for the most part, people aren't rallying cavalry unless it's Attila Takeda. Anyways, this is a solid build, but there were points we had to shave off. Loose formation doesn't do anything. Impregnable doesn't do anything. So we made some changes to the build, and here is an example of an anti-Attila Takeda build that we would have used if we had to in the moment in KVK. This is the build we would have used. I think this is a pretty solid build. It requires full infantry, and it still capitalizes on some of the most point-efficient ways to gain punch from talent points, such as Strong of Body. I really like Hold the Line, reducing the damage you take by 20% for 2 seconds after being attacked, and there's a 10% chance to have that happen. We've got Elevated Counterattack. We reduce our damage taken pretty substantially. We're also reducing our damage dealt, which is not amazing. It's conceivable we could have gone over to medicinal supplies, but I sort of feel like I'd rather just dump more troops into the garrison than have a small number keep getting healed. So this is one way in which you can sort of optimize against Attila Takeda, and this is a build that I used and would use against Attila Takeda, I should say. I would use this against Attila Takeda. It's a variation of a build I did use, which is this one over here. Okay, so that's just your standard Richard and Charles. What we found is that Wu Zetian and Constantine were probably better, and Constantine much better than Wu Zetian, as it turns out. Now, there's a reason that that's the case. A part of the way that that sort of was uncovered to us was from our testing, but a part of that was just by evaluating the skills that Wu Zetian has. She is, let's see, increasing your health. Okay. When commanding the garrison, incoming skill damage is reduced by 15%. Well, guess what? You're not taking skill damage. And your troops have a 50% chance to increase their defense when taking skill damage. Well, guess what? This skill right here is 100% invalidated by Attila Takeda. Tears of Blood, attacks have a 10% chance to silence their target for 2 seconds. This is invalidated by an expertise Attila. He makes that march immune to silence. So Wu Zetian is less effective, but she's also less effective because of her talents. We looked at Constantine, who's got some similar ones in the support tree that are totally irrelevant. Loose formation becomes irrelevant. Emergency protection becomes irrelevant. So we knew that we needed to make some tweaks here, and we liked Constantine as a primary. Of all the Garrison Commanders I've just showed you, Constantine primary with Richard secondary performed the best in our tests. And there's a number of reasons why I think that would be the case. Let's start with the Constantine. The Constantine would have Rejuvenate to generate huge amounts of rage. Now, that huge amounts of rage is going to apply a 40% attack reduction and a 10% damage taken reduction, which is a really big deal to have very high uptime, debuffing Attila and Takeda, who are doing lots of damage all the time. It's not just like big burst when they do a skill damage. So every second that you're reducing their attack is generally like very effective. And if we look further at these talents, we get Empty Fortress Stratagem, we get King's Guard, but we could do the top part of the tree over here, like I was showing you on Charles Martel, where we can get Iron Spear, we can make our way to Strong of Body, and we can get Hold the Line. These are all really powerful talents. They're very powerful talents. Wu Zetian doesn't quite have as much to offer in that front. If we look at really just any leadership commander here, In the leadership tree, yes, we can increase our defense slightly every time that we use a skill, which is good. We can increase the amount of healing we receive, which is like fine. We do a little bit more rage gen, but Hidden Wrath is really good if you're getting swarmed every time this commander's troops are attacked. This, by the way, is kind of the equivalent of this talent in the attack tree on Attila. This is what makes Burning Blood. Attila is very difficult to swarm because of Burning Blood, among other things. Card up in the top when I explain why swarming an Attila Takeda rally can get you in big trouble. You basically feed so much rage to the rally that you give them 100% uptime on their skills. The same is true with a Wu Zetian, but guess what? That Wu Zetian style lead is really good in like an Ark of Osiris, where, yes, the garrison is getting swarmed, but it's diminished in its effectiveness in a situation like a flag where it's getting rallied, there's only one march hitting it, it's not doing as much. So I didn't think Hidden Wrath was as good in this context. Also, Fresh Recruits is just wasted talent points here. Your ability as a garrison captain to bring more troops doesn't really matter. The increased normal attack damage is fine. When you're below 50% strength, you increase your attack. This is good. But overall, there just wasn't a ton of exciting talents, and you were getting some lackluster stuff along the way with a Wu Zetian primary. So we found that a Constantine primary, Richard secondary was really good. Now, I know people really hate on Richard, and I myself struggled a bit with, like, why might Richard actually be the correct play for the garrison as a pairing with Constantine? And, you know, look, maybe someone else has done some more testing and they would prove it's somebody else, but we saw some really good results with this. And one thing that's happening is that your Constantine is reducing the attack of the enemy. Your Richard is reducing the damage of the enemy by 30%, and those do stack with each other. So that was reducing the effectiveness of the Attila Takeda pretty substantially. We're also reducing our reducing our damage taken very substantially. And we're increasing our counterattack, so we're doing more damage to the enemy because normal attack and counterattack are how you do all your damage if you're using a Richard and a Charles. Or a Richard, by the way, and a Constantine. I like the extra stats to infantry. This is good. The extra healing effect here is almost negligible and not really even worth mentioning. However, the extra 5% damage reduction from the expertise skill is also excellent. You increase your damage to cavalry by 2%, which I know it's like not much, but like it is there. It's not nothing. And unfortunately, the rest of this is about reducing the march speed of the enemy, which is really irrelevant against Attila Takeda. But that set of talents and commanders we found to work really, really well. Richard secondary and either a Wu Zetian or a Constantine primary. Now, the thing that I don't love about, Richard that I found confusing is that, like, this healing effect, you can kind of get other ways. What I mean by that is that, like, look, you can always dump more troops into a flag. You could always dump more troops into the flag, and, like, isn't that kind of like you healed? Do you see what I mean? It's not the same. And the reason it's not the same is that people only reinforce the flag when it gets below the threshold that their march can actually enter it, typically. That's maybe not the best way to think about reinforcing a flag. In fact, that's the right way to think about reinforcing a rally, the wrong way to think about reinforcing a flag. Because you can put an infinite number of marches into a flag, you really should just, like, very regularly send lots of marches to get into the flag rather than waiting to get a full march in, but, whatever. So that replacement effect ends up actually having some amount of meaningful helpfulness until somebody actually, boom, gets back in and refills that flag. Now, there's a few more optimizations that we made in our anti-Attila Takeda strategy. One of those is to simply look at what civilization are you using? Since we knew infantry was going to be the jam, Rome was a civilization that a lot of our infantry players looked at. You have a special unit that contributes a little, but doesn't actually amplify the effectiveness of the entirety of the garrison. A special unit like this is essentially similar to sort of like having T5 versus T4. It's not that big of a difference, but the stats are slightly different on the unit, but it doesn't amplify the effectiveness of the whole garrison if you're the captain with this unit. But what does is the 5% infantry defense that Rome is giving you. The other thing that you could look at doing, which of course our garrison captains were doing, is your city skin. Your city skin should be full infantry. We've got this one here, as do a lot of our top T5 players. 5% decreased cavalry attack and archer defense doesn't matter to you. It's all infantry in the flag. 10% infantry health is really quite exceptional. So you want to optimize your skin. And in addition, you want to make sure that you go into your commander tab. And this is an easy one to forget. I know I did. And you want to update your knight head to be your garrison captain primary, and either iron guard or drill master to be your garrison commander secondary. That would be my recommendation for just a bunch of optimizations that you can do against Attila and Takeda. I'm sure there is more that we can talk about. In fact, I know there are 2 hard counters that we promised we would not talk about, but well, we can talk about the fact that they exist because it's been proven to us. However, what we're going to do tomorrow is a clinic live stream, baby, reviewing how you can counter any pair, and you guys will throw out some pairs. We're going to look at things you could consider and the approach that we take for testing, and we'll talk all about that. Should be a lot of fun. If you want to join that, please do like and subscribe. That way you get the notifications, hit the bell. That's the thing YouTubers say, right? Like, hit the bell, smash the like button. I don't know. Am I being cliche now? We are a sponsored creator with Rise of Kingdoms. Had a lot of fun making this video for you, and until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom. Been waiting a while to make this video. 2 hard counters to Attila Takeda, people. Get testing. They exist. More test. More testing.